Here's what no one really tells you about YNAB. It doesn't actually tell you what you can afford. I mean, sure, it'll show you when your targets exceed your income, but it stops there. It doesn't tell you what to fix. Which categories are too high? Are your fixed costs the problem? Is dining out quietly blowing up your budget? Or are your savings goals just unrealistic for your income right now? And before I go any further, let me define what I mean by afford. When I say what you can afford, I don't mean technically what fits on paper or what you can swipe for this month. I mean what you can fund consistently without pulling from savings priorities, overspending, or feeling stressed month after month after month. That's what we're going to figure out today. Today, I'm walking you through exactly how I'm setting up my YNAB budget for 2026, start to finish, using my real numbers. This is especially helpful if you're new to YNAB or just resetting for the new year, because I'm not just showing you what I click, I'm showing you how I decide what's realistic. This process has 3 clear phases. First, we'll review 2025 exactly as it happened, no judgment, no changes. Then we'll use that information to intentionally design 2026. And only after that, we'll go back into YNAB and create targets. YNAB handles execution. This process handles decision making. Whenever I start a brand new budget, the first thing I do is write everything down. Anything I can remember spending money on over the past year or even the last few months goes on that list. At this stage, I'm not thinking about amounts at all. I'm just answering one question. What does my money touch? YNAB's templates are helpful here, not as rules, but as prompts to make sure nothing obvious is missing. Here is the default template. I'm actually going to delete all these categories and fill them in with my own based on what I know I spend. But here's the important part. Writing everything down is a great first step. Looking back at what actually happened is what makes it accurate. So once this list exists, I immediately move on to the data. I use YNAB's income versus expense report to look at the past year. If you're newer, the last month or 3 months works just fine. This report will show me average spending by category, which is much more reliable than just guessing. The goal here is not to fix anything yet. It's just to document reality. If a number surprises you or feels uncomfortable, that's information, not a problem to solve yet. Now I take those averages and plug them into my modified conscious spending plan. If you want to plug in your own numbers and see where you land, definitely recommend checking out Ramit Sethi's website, downloading the conscious spending plan for yourself, and using it as a guide. This first pass is purely a review of 2025 as it actually happened. No optimizing, no cutting, no being good, just answering where did my money really go. I start with income, rounding slightly just for planning purposes. Partner contributions average $2,500 a month. Skipping other income, paychecks averaged $9,000 a month. Interest averaged $100 a month. And stock vests averaged $6,500 a month. That gives me roughly $18,000 per month in planning income. This number becomes the constraint for everything else. Now I move on to fixed costs, the non-negotiables. Rent averaged $3,400 a month, but I know that our actual rent is $3,475, so I will add that. With our rent, we also pay for storage, garage, and building utilities. So storage is $50. Garage is on average $255, but I know that cost is $260. Building utilities average is $67 a month, but we'll go ahead and round up to $70 for the CSP. So far, fixed costs for just housing are at 22%. Next, we have utilities, which average $299 or $300 a month. Wi-Fi averages $104, but I know that our bill is actually $125. Renter's insurance is $13 a month. Our cleaning service on average is $289. I'm going to round up to $300 because that's how much 2 cleanings are. Household goods, $862. I'll make that $860 in the CSP. So that takes care of everything under home. We'll keep going down to food and drink. Our meal kit that we order regularly on average is $850. Groceries are $287. Let's just say $290. Meals at work are on average $214, let's say $215, just to keep it round. The goal here is to paint in broad strokes. You don't need to be ultra specific with decimals and things like that. Planes, trains, and automobiles, which is this whole group. It includes things like my auto loan, auto insurance, taxes, registration, and fees, and also miscellaneous costs like parking and tolls or citations and tickets, which are way less frequent. I consider all this the total cost of ownership for having a vehicle. So I'm not just going to pick apart those regular expenses. I'm actually going to look at the total here, which is about $1,100, and I'll add that into the CSP. Moving on down, we have personal care. My average is $300 a month. And then subscriptions. These are services that we pay for every single month. The average there is $202, so $200. Next up, we have annual fees, which are, as they sound, fees that come out once a year. And so the total for that is $217. And finally, we have debt payments. For these, I have student loans and taxes that I owe for 2024. We can look here at the average between the two over the year of 2025. We're at $1,000 a month. I already know that will change in 2026, but for now, I'm just documenting reality. All in, fixed costs land at 56% of take-home pay. That's a critical insight. It's right there in that sweet spot between that 50 and 60% that's recommended. So it tells me 2025 wasn't about survival. It was all about allocation. Most of my investing in 2025 happened pre-tax. So this doesn't show up in YNAB. For this review, after-tax investing is effectively zero, and that's okay. The goal here is accuracy, not forcing everything into one tool. This is where the imbalance becomes obvious. Out of pocket, which covered all of my health expenses through this year, averaged $250 a month. Festivities, which is my holiday category, averaged $102 a month. Gifts for others, non-holiday, averaged $105 a month. Mutual aid, which is charitable giving to support my community, averaged $536 a month. Travel, $4,800 a month. Sitting this next to fixed costs really brings into focus where things may have tipped over. So 32% now on savings goals, which is way above the recommended suggestion of 5 to 10%. And then lastly, you won't see this in my spending because I didn't spend from this, but I added to my 3-month emergency fund and I added $18,000. So that is $1,500 a month. And so you can see here with savings goals at 40%, travel and these 3 months of expenses could be seen as reasonable on their own, but together they definitely create tension. For guilt-free spending, we're left with only 4%. That's way lower than the target of 20 to 34%, which explains why we pretty much broke even on our budget this year. Takeout and delivery averaged $1,500 a month. Coffee averaged $320. Pilates and fitness averaged $190 or $183. Let's just round that up to $190. And hobbies, let's see. Hobbies averaged $87. Let's round that up to $90 a month. I also gave myself a general guilt-free spending budget of $150 a month, and you can see we're right there. But we're negative here according to this CSP, negative $1,300. So if I was to add that additional $150, we'd be like negative $1,600 a month. This explains why 2025 felt tight, even with a strong income. So that completes the 2025 spending review. We've entered guilt-free spending, savings goals, investments, and fixed cost into our CSP. Up to now, we've described the past. Now we switch modes. This is where we design 2026 intentionally. I start with fixed costs because they set the ceiling for everything else. Rent, storage, garage, building utilities, these will all stay the same going into at least the first half of 2026. Same with utilities, Wi-Fi, renter's insurance, and cleaning service. Household goods has been hovering around this $800 mark all year, but we're a little bit over. I want to drop this down to $800 going into 2026. Our food basics are around $1,350. I want to see if we can drop this to somewhere around $1,200 a month. So for groceries, we're at $290. I'm just going to bump this up to $300. Meals at work, let's see if we can keep that within $200. And then this $850 is over by about $150. So let's drop meal kit to $700 and see how that works for the first few weeks of the new year. Planes, trains, and automobiles will stay exactly the same. Personal care, though, is at $300. I think I can drop that down to maybe $150 and see how that works. These aren't punishment cuts, they're recalibration. Debt is the biggest intentional shift for 2026. In 2025, I averaged $300 a month for my 2024 income taxes. And then I started paying my student loans in August when the SAVE plan started accruing interest again. In 2026, I'm increasing debt payments substantially. So at minimum, I want to contribute $2,000 a month to my student loans. I also need to continue to pay $300 a month to the IRS. So that sets a baseline at $2,300 a month. This increases fixed costs, and that's intentional. I'm choosing faster debt payoff over flexibility this year, knowing that it constrains spending in other areas. In 2026, I'm going to restart after tax, but pre-paycheck contributions to my retirement to a Roth 401k at $500 a month. I'd stopped contributing to any of my retirement accounts after hitting Coast Fire in 2025, but I'm going to change that going forward. This is a conscious trade-off of less flexibility, but more alignment with my long-term goals. When it comes to savings, travel is taking a major hit, dropping from $4,800 a month down to $1,000. That's right away setting a cap on how much we want to spend on travel this year. Emergency fund contributions will stay the same at this $1,500 a month. And these others I'm going to tweak just a little bit. Festivities, I want to bump up to $125 a month, which will set me up for $1,500 a year total to spend on the holidays. Gifts for others. It looks like we're at 105. I'm going to drop that down to 100. In 2025, mutual aid was higher due to one-off and reactive giving. For 2026, I reduced this to $10 a month baseline with the intention of giving more only when additional income arrives. This protects my baseline budget while still leaving room for generosity. Savings goals at 16%, a little bit higher than this 5 to 10%, but I know that's coming from these two and especially my emergency fund contributions. That's okay. I need to build that up. Now, guilt-free spending becomes viable again. We're at 19%, which is just below that 20% mark. Takeout and delivery will drop to $1,300 a month. Coffee, because we bought a at-home coffee maker, will drop down to $100 a month. Pilates and fitness will drop because I'm no longer attending the Pilates studio and just the gym to $40 a month. And hobbies, I'm also going to cap at $40 a month. These aren't moral judgments. These are just structural choices. Guilt-free spending isn't a reward for being good. It's the cost of making the budget sustainable. So guilt-free category subtotal is $1,480. The leftover of guilt-free spending every single month is $2,000, $2,050. Now, with this leftover money, I can do whatever I want. If I want to go ahead and spend more on travel, I can. If I want to buy a bunch of clothes, I can. But what I want to do with some of this leftover money this year is add another $1,000 to my debt payments, kicking this up to $3,300. That brings my fixed cost to 67%, which is obviously higher than this artificially because of those debt payments. My investments stay the same. Savings goals are still at 16%. Guilt-free spending drops down to 14% with about $1,000 a month left over for anything that we want. After these changes, fixed costs increase because of debt, travel drops substantially, mutual aid becomes intentional instead of more reactive, and guilt-free spending becomes livable again. This is what affordability looks like in practice, at least to me. Now that the plan is finalized, we can go back into YNAB and tell it what to do. One quick note before I calibrate my targets. I've organized my YNAB into views that mirror my conscious spending plan, fixed costs, savings goals, and guilt-free spending. That's a more advanced setup, and we're not going to get into it here. You don't need it to budget successfully. It just helps me to stay aligned with my plan. We'll take a look at a couple of examples as we revisit some of the targets. So I'm going through and taking a look at my CSP and comparing the values here with the targets that are in YNAB. So rent is $3,475 in my CSP, and that's also what's in YNAB. I'm going to go through and look for any inconsistencies. Right away, I can see that utilities in YNAB has a target of $400 a month. In my CSP, based on my spending, the average is $300 a month. So that's about a $100 discrepancy. I intentionally like to add a small buffer here. I like to just have it just in case. It makes me feel good. Your targets don't need to be exact, but they do need to be reasonable. So I'll keep that. Debt targets need more nuance. In my CSP, my total planned debt payoff for 2026 is higher than what I'm setting as a monthly target in YNAB. That's intentional. The YNAB target represents my baseline guaranteed payment, the amount I know I can fund every single month from regular income. The additional debt payoff will come from lump sum income like stock vests. I don't want YNAB nudging me monthly for money that isn't available yet. When those larger payments arrive, I'll manually assign extra money to debt and make one-off payments. This keeps the budget realistic month to month while still aligning with the bigger annual goal. Once a target is set, it's not permanent. If I'm constantly moving money in or out of a category, that's feedback. The targets are guardrails and not rules. The goal isn't perfection, it's alignment. If your underfunded number looks scary in a new budget, that's normal. YNAB assumes you're starting from zero. Once you add your account balances and assign existing money, it usually settles pretty quickly. And that's the full process. We wrote everything down, upgraded it with real data, reviewed 2025 honestly, designed 2026 intentionally, and then told YNAB what to do. That's how you figure out what you can actually afford, not just what fits on paper. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this helped you feel confident setting up your YNAB budget, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.